Hello, good morning everybody. So now today's topic is histology of this nervous tissue. The nervous system is a specialized type of this tissue that has property of ability to conduct the impulse rapidly from one part of the body to another. Nerve cells can convert the information obtained from the environment into the code that can be transmitted along their axon. By such coding, the same neurons can transmit different kind of the information. The total number of these neurons in the human brain is estimated at more than 1 trillion. Nervous tissue is composed of neurons and neuroglia. So nervous system divide into the central nervous system, cerebellar cortex, cerebral cortex, and peripheral nervous system including these nerves, dorsal root ganglion, sympathetic trunks ganglion. So whole nervous system divide into the two parts CNS and PNS. So nervous tissue is the neurons or the nerve cells has the special property of the irritability and conductivity, and nerve cells possess the neuroglia. So histology of the nervous tissue, parts of the neurons or the structures of this neuron. First neuron, here you can see this diagram. The neurons are the specialized cells that constitute the structural and functional unit of this nervous system. The neuroglia are the supporting connective tissue cells present in nervous system. It has been taught that the lymph vessels are not present, but the view that's recently been challenged. The nervous system may be divided into this CNS and PNS, but here there is only I will cover the nervous tissue. So nervous tissue including these neurons and its cells. So first, what is the structures of these neurons? So neurons, more than the 1 trillion functional unit of this nervous system, and neuroglia are the connective tissue cells. The neurons are the responsible for the respective integrative and the motor function of the nervous system. So neurons vary considerably in size, shape and other features. However, the most of them have some major features each common, and these are the cell body or the soma. So here you can see this cell body. This one are the cell body. Also name is given the soma or the perikaryon. Neurons consist of the cell body that gives of a variable number of this process. Here you can see this dendrites and the axon. These all are the process of this nerve cells. The cell body contains the cytoplasm like a typical cells. It consists of a mass of the cytoplasm surrounded by the cell membrane. The cytoplasm contains a large central nucleus with a prominent nucleolus, highly developed rough endoplasmic reticulum, numerous mitochondria, lysosome and Golgi complex. So this one are this cell body and neurons. Now the nasal body or the nasal substance. So nasal substance are the cytoplasm shown the presence of this granular material that stain intensely with basic dye. This material is the nasal substance, also called the nasal body or the granules. When they examined by the electron microscope, this body are seen to be composed of rough surface endoplasmic reticulum. The presence of this abundant granular endoplasmic reticulum is an indication of a high level of this protein synthesis. Neurons protein are the needed for the maintenance and the repair and for the production of this neurotransmitter and enzyme. Now second one is the neurofibrils. So this one are this nucleolus, nasal body, this one are the nucleus, this one are the dendrites, it is the process, this one are the axon. The anterior part name is given this axon hillock. So neurofibrils, these are the seen when the prepared by the silver impregnated method. So another features of the neurofibrils, these one are the permeating the cytoplasm. Presence of the network of the fibril name is given the neurofibril. When seen under the electron microscope, it shows the microfilament, microtubules and the neurofilaments. So this one are the neurofibrils. Now the axon hillock. Here you can see this one are the anterior part from the axon. Name is given this axon hillock. So axon, hillock and the light segment. In initial segment of the axon hillock, the axon hillock and the initial segment of the axon are of special functional significance. This is the region where axon potential are generated. So this spike generation resulting in conducting along the axon. The initial segment is unmyelinated. It often receives the axonal synapse that are inhibitory. The plasma membrane here are called the axon hillock. Some neurons contain the pigment granules neuromelanin in neurons of the substantia nigra. So this one are the axon hillock. Now neuritis. The process arising from the cell body of the neurons are called the neuritis. So this one are the process name is given this dendritis. This process name is given this axon itself. So neuritis is the process arising from the cell body of the neuron. So name is given the neuritis. So neuritis, these are the two kind of this neuritis. Number of short branching process called the dendritis and the one longer process called the axon. So both dendritis and axon is including name is given this neuritis. The short one are the short process or branching process called the dendritis and one longer process called the axon. Now axon. Here you can see this axon. This one are this long process. Name is given the axon. So axon may be extend from this considerable distance away from the cell body. The longest axon may be as much as 1 meter long. So this total diameter of this axon is 1 meter. So here there is a long process name is given this axon. This part of the axon hillock. In this short process branching process name is given the dendritis. So axon total longest axon may be 1 meter long. Each axon has a uniform diameter and is devoid of this nasal substance. The nasal free zone extends for the short distance into the cell body. This part of the cell's body is called the axon hillock. तो यहाँ पे जो एंटीरियर पोर्शन है एक्सोन हेलोक में नेजल बॉडी नहीं होती है. रेस्ट ऑफ दिस पार्ट इट कंटेन द नेजल बॉडी. This darker one are the nasal body. In this absent of this nasal body, this initial portion of the axon name is given the axon hillock. And this one are the long dendritic process. Long neuritic process name is given this axon. So axon has a uniform diameter and is devoid of the nasal substance. The nasal free zone extends for the short distance into the cell body. This part name is given the axon hillock. The axon hillock is called the initial segment. The cytoplasm within the axon is called the exoplasm and its cell membrane is called the exolemma. The exoplasm contains all the cell organelles of the neurons cell body except ribosome. Hence the protein synthesized in the cell body are continuous transported towards the axon terminals by the process called the exoplasmic transport. In an axon, the impulse travel away from the cell body. Axon constitute what are commonly called the nerve fibers. The bundle of this nerve fiber found in central nervous system are called the nerve tracts, while the bundle of nerve fiber found in peripheral nervous system are called the peripheral nerve. An axon can terminate into the two ways. Within the CNS is always terminate by coming in intimate, and outside the CNS name is given this neurons and junction between these neurons being called the synapse. So outside the CNS, the axon may be in relation to the effector organ, muscles or gland, or it may be synapsing with the neurons in the peripheral ganglion. Now, second one are the dendritis. So this cell process or neuritis divide into the two axon and dendritis. In cell body, soma or the perikaryon contain the nasal body, neurofilaments, microtubules, lipofuscin pigment and clumps. Now dendritis. So dendritis, they are the short process of the neurons and terminate into the and terminate near the cell body. They are irregular in thickness and nasal granules extend into them. They bear the numerous small spindle that are the variable shape in the dendritis. The nerve impulse travels toward the cell body. So this one are the neurons. Here you can see this cell body. It contains the nucleus, nucleolus and nasal body, and this one are the absent of this nasal body. Name is given this axon, hillock. This part are the axon. It covered the myelin sheath. In this short process name is given this dendritis. So this one are the part of this neuron. Now structural classification of these neurons. Neurons are divided into the based on the process found on the cell body. First, there is a multipolar neuron, several dendrites and one axon, most common cell type. Bipolar neurons, one main dendritis and one axon, found in retina, inner ear and olfactory. Unipolar neurons, one process only, developed from the bipolar, are always sensory neurons. This one are the structural classification of the neuron. Now structural classification of the neuron. Here you can see this multipolar neuron, dendritis, cell body, trigger zone, axon terminals. This one are the multipolar. Structural classification of this neuron, there is a bipolar. Here there is a two axon. Name is given this bipolar neurons. So one are this above and one are the below. So this one are the trigger zone, axon. This one are the axon terminal. So this type of this neuron name is given this bipolar neuron. Unipolar neuron, there is a single cell body. Name is given this unipolar neurons. And here there is a association or the interneurons name of the histologist that first describe them or their appearance name is given this Purkinje cells. These cells process and here there is a several dendritis name is given this Purkinje cells in pyramidal shapes of the cell body and dendritis and single axon name is given the pyramidal cells. So this one are the different classification of this neuron. Now neuroglia cells or the supporting cells. Here you can see this supporting cells name is given the neuroglia. In addition to neurons, the nervous system contains the several type of the supporting cells called the neuroglia. So neuroglia cells are the astrocyte. Here you can see this astrocyte. This one are the astrocyte. So astrocyte, second one the oligodendrocyte and microglia. So astrocyte are the small star-shaped cells that give off a number of these processes. The processes are often flattened into the leaf-like laminar that may be partly surrounded neurons and separate from other neurons. The process frequently end in expansion in retained blood vessels or in relation to the surface of the brain. Small swelling cell called a gliosome are present on the process of the astrocyte. The swelling are rich in mitochondria. Second one are the oligodendria. Here you can see these cells are the oligodendrocyte. So oligodendrocyte, the cells are rounded or the pear-shaped body with relatively few process. Oli means scanty. The cells provide myelin sheath to nerve fiber that lie within the brain and the spinal cord. Their relationship to the nerve fibers is basically similar to that of the squamous cells to peripheral nerve fibers. So these cells are the oligodendrocyte. Now third one are these cells name is given this ependymal cells. Here you can see this ependymal cells. This type of the cells are the ependymal cells. These ependymal cells are the low polymer epithelial cells lining the ventricles of the brain and central canal of the spinal cord. The specialized ependymal cells in choroid plexus. They secrete the CSF. In some region, these cells are the ciliated that help in the movement of the CSF. Modification of the ependymal cells in the ventricle help in the formation of this choroid plexus and CSF. The ependymal cells lining the floor of this fourth ventricle have long basal process and term tensinocytes. So this one are the ependymal cells. Microglia. Here you can see this microglial cell, this small darker one are the microglial cells. So microglial cells are the smallest neuroglial cells. The cell's body is flattened with short process. They are the member of this mononuclear phagocyte system and the mesodermal in origin. They are more numerous in gray matter than in white matter. So these all cells are the supporting cells, or the name is given this neuroglial cells. Some squamous cells also you can see in satellite cells. When you can see the squamous cells, here you can see the astrocyte star-shaped cells from the blood-brain barrier by covering the blood capillary, metabolize neurotransmitter, regulate the potassium balance, provide the structural support found in the parenchyma of this brain and spinal cord. So these cells are the astrocyte. Second one, oligodendrocyte. Most common glial cells type each form of this myelin sheet around the more than one axon in CNS, analogous to squamous cell of PNS. Then satellite cells. So neuroglial cells, there are the satellite cells. Here you can see the satellite cells are the principal glial cells found in peripheral nervous system, specifically in sensory, sympathetic and the parasympathetic ganglia. They help to regulate and stabilize the environment around the ganglion cell body. They are derived from the neural crest. They supply the neuritis to the surrounding neurons and also act as a protective cushion cells. So this one are the satellite cells, are the flat cells surrounding neuronal cells body in peripheral ganglia, support neurons in the PNS ganglia. These cells are the satellite cells. Squamous cells. So cells encircle the peripheral nervous system axon. Each cells produce the part of the myelin sheath surrounding an axon in the PNS. So this cell's name is given this squamous cells. At the localate in squamous cells are seen in peripheral nervous system and envelop the axon. They are flattened cells with flat nucleus. They form the either myelinated or unmyelinated covering over the axon. They form myelin sheath in peripheral nervous system. Axon may be myelinated or unmyelinated axon. Having a myelin sheath are called the myelinated axon. They are derived from these neural crystals. So these are the squamous cells. Now PNS, or the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system are also, there is a several type of this bundles of these nerve fibers. So peripheral nerves are the bundle of this nerve fiber or the axon outside the CNS. They may be myelinated or unmyelinated. Nerve fiber carry the impulse from the spinal cord or the brain to peripheral structures such as the muscles or the gland are called the efferent or the motor fibers. Efferent fibers axon neuron located in gray matter of the spinal cord. Nerve fiber carry impulse from peripheral organ to the brain or spinal cord are called the efferent fibers. So efferent nerve fibers are processed of the neurons that are located in ganglia. So here you can see this microscopic structures of this peripheral nerve. So peripheral nerve fibers, myelinated, unmyelinated, are arranged in form of a bundle surrounded by connective tissue. Each nerve fiber with its squamous cells, basal lamina, is surrounded by a layer of this connective tissue called the exoneurium. The endoneurium contain type 2 collagen fibers, fibroblasts, squamous cells, endothelial cells, and the macrophage. Many nerve fibers together form the bundle or the fasciculi. Endoneurium hold adjoining nerve fiber together and they facilitate their aggregation to form the fasciculi. Each fascicule is surrounded by a thicker layer of this connective tissue is called perineurium. So perineurium may be fascicular held together fairly dense layer of connective tissue surrounding the entire nerve is called the epineurium. The nuclei seen in the section of the axon in squamous cells and fibrocyte, the squamous cell myelinated and surround the individual axon or the enclosed unmyelinated axon. So this one are the section of the peripheral nerve. Now ganglia. So here there is a spinal cord, anterior horn, this one are the posterior horn, and this posterior horn there is a sensory part and it contains the dorsal root ganglion. So difference between this sympathetic ganglion and dorsal root ganglion, spinal ganglion. So ganglion क्या है? It is aggregation of the cell body of these neurons placed outside the CNS are known as the ganglia. Ganglia are two types, sensory and autonomic. The sensory ganglia are the collection of the cell body of the sensory neurons. Sensory ganglia are associated with the dorsal nerve root of the spinal nerve or the dorsal nerve root ganglia with 5th, 7th, 8th and 9th and 10th cranial nerve. So these dorsal root ganglia are including in sensory ganglia. So neurons is this ganglia are of the unipolar type, except in the case of this ganglia associated with this vestibulocochlear nerve in which they are the bipolar. The peripheral process of each neuron form a efferent fibers of the peripheral nerve. The central process enter the spinal cord or the brainstem. Now histology of this ganglia. So difference between the sensory and the motor ganglia. Sensory or the spinal ganglia are pseudo-unipolar. Sympathetic ganglia are multipolar. Spinal ganglia large, round and vary size. Sympathetic small, angular and uniform size. Nucleus centrally placed, nucleus eccentrically placed. Found in group, found in scatter. Well defined satellite cells, poorly defined satellite cell. So this one are the difference between this spinal ganglion and sympathetic ganglion. Now spinal and sympathetic ganglion. Here you can see this histology of this ganglion is covered by the outside by connective tissue capsule and entire ganglion is provided by the fine connective tissue. The unipolar neurons with centrally placed nucleus are large and arranged in group chiefly at the periphery of the ganglia. The group of the cells are separated by the group of the myelinated nerve fiber. The cell body of each neuron is surrounded by a layer of flattened capsule cells or the satellite cell. Outside the satellite cells, there is a layer of this delicate connective tissue. This connective tissue. So, this one are the ganglia. Now, autonomic ganglia. This one are the spinal and sympathetic ganglia. This one. So autonomic ganglia का जो growth structure है, they are the concerned with this nerve supply of the smooth muscle of the gland. So histology of this autonomic ganglia is covered outside by the thin capsule, permeated by the connective tissue. The multipolar neurons with eccentrically placed nucleus are not arranged in defined group as a sensory ganglia but are scattered throughout the ganglia. The nerve fiber are the non-myelinated and thinner. They are therefore much less conspicuous than in sensory ganglia. Satellite cells are present around the neurons of the autonomic ganglia, but they are not well defined. The nasal substance of the neurons is much better defined in autonomic ganglia than in sensory ganglia. So these one are the two difference between the sensory ganglia and autonomic ganglia. The sympathetic ganglia, neurons cytoplasm synthesize catamolane and is parasympathetic ganglia synthesize acetylcholine. So these one are the spinal and sympathetic ganglia. So dorsal root ganglia is including in spinal ganglia. Here you can see this histology of this dorsal root ganglia. This one are these cells present in dorsal root ganglia. These are the dorsal root ganglia cell body are larger unipolar type of this neuron except in vestibulocochlear nerve in there is a bipolar neurons. And neurons with centrally placed nucleus cell body of these neurons are arranged in group. Myelinated nerve fibers are arranged in bundle. So this one well defined connective tissue capsule. This one are the dorsal root ganglia or spinal ganglia, also named as sensory ganglia. So sensory ganglia, here there is present the satellite cells, neurons and bundles of this nerve fiber. Spinal ganglia, here you can see this pseudo unipolar neurons, satellite cells and bundle of this nerve fiber. Sensory neuron, also you can see this cell body are large unipolar type of this neuron except in 8 cranial nerve or vestibulocochlear. Dorsolateral sensory neurons with satellite cells. Now dorsalosensory neurons, both here you can see this unipolar neuron, but in autonomic ganglia, you see the sympathetic ganglia. Here there is a multipolar neurons. So you can see these cells, this one are the neurons and the nerve fibers and satellite cells. So cell body are smaller but it multipolar type of this neuron. Neurons with eccentrically placed nucleus. Cell body of these neurons does not form a definite groups. Unmyelinated nerve fibers are scattered and satellite cells are less prominent, poorly defined or absent the connective tissue capsule. So these one are the sympathetic ganglia. So here there is a complete class of this histology of this nervous tissue. So ganglion and nuclei में क्या difference है? Ganglion is these are the collection of these nerve cells, gray matter outside the brain and the spinal cord. In nuclei, these are the isolate of gray matter situated deep inside the cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem and spinal cord. So here there is a